With the Game Awards upon us yet again, people have been very vocal about their opinions of the Game of the Year nominees. This game doesn't deserve it. This game deserves it instead. All these games are terrible. The studios have bribed the jury. All kinds of feelings and conspiracy theories. I'd like to dive in and explain why, at least to me, choosing the Game of the Year is not so black and white as simply picking the game that happened to be the most fun. To you. It's not just about that, especially not when most games are fun for different reasons and to different people. I'd like to start off with nipping a very popular criticism in the bud. Games journalists are not paid to give a game a certain score, and the Game Awards jury is not bribed to nominate certain games. We should be able to disagree with the nominations while also recognizing that everyone's opinion is different, and the jury was mostly comprised of people with different opinions from yours, just as they may align with other people's opinions instead. I also want to clarify that this video is going to be focusing a lot on my personal opinion. Being factually correct about something so subjective like what games are enjoyable or pretty is impossible. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, as they say. But of course, it's not all about beauty. There are awards for best art direction, just as there are awards for things such as best audio design, best narrative, best music, which is exactly the point. The Game of the Year can't just excel at one thing, it has to encompass many different things. It needs to stand out as a whole. When I decide my personal Game of the Year nominees, I mainly look at 4 things. The most obvious one is if the game is entertaining one way or another. I look at the game's narrative to see if it's engaging, and this one is particularly important to me as I'm also a game writer. I check if the visuals fit with the game and if they're unique in any aspect. It's not just about being as realistic as possible. I pay attention to all things auditory, if the music enhances what I am supposed to feel in certain scenes, if the general sound design is good in terms of ambience, sound effects, and the voice acting itself. Let me elaborate on these a bit more. This is pretty straightforward. A game doesn't necessarily have to be fun in order for me to enjoy it, but it has to entertain me in some way. I play games to be entertained or to experience something, after all. Bloodborne, for example, was very frustrating and challenging, and I'm not sure if I'd specifically say that I had fun while playing it.
Give me the option to heal! I hate this game.
But I still absolutely loved it. So long as I get some form of enjoyment out of a game, that is the requirement fulfilled. This one is probably the hottest of topics, or at least it was in 2020. A game's story doesn't have to make you excited, or be one with a happy ending, or be one that makes you cry when it tugs at your heartstrings. It can also be a story that pisses people off. The Last of Us Part 2 definitely succeeded in engaging people, and you really can't deny this. I think we can all agree that the story made us angry one way or another, but a lot of people didn't realize that this was the intention. It made you engaged, it made you feel something. You may have absolutely despised it, but it made you feel. That's not to say a story has to make you deeply enraged in order for it to qualify as Game of the Year, but the narrative has to pique your interest enough to either make you feel something about it or to make you keep playing the game. Preferably the latter, but some people get so emotionally invested that they refuse to keep playing the game, which is an achievement in its own right. Like I said before, a game definitely doesn't have to look realistic in order for it to be considered as graphically impactful. Psychonauts 2 has a very cartoonish art style that almost feels like a breath of fresh air at the same time as it stays true to its predecessor. In terms of art direction, it's such a great example to use because of the game's many levels. In Psychonauts, you travel into people's brains, and since all characters are different, with different interests and personalities, these worlds all have to look unique, while also sticking to a style that makes sense with the rest of the game and its franchise. Balancing this seems like such a hard thing to accomplish, but they pulled it off perfectly. Video game music is one of those things that on its own is great, sure, but pairing it with the game's narrative and visuals can be the difference between lukewarm emotions and a flood of tears. The amount of times I've simply been looking out at the beautiful mountains in Skyrim and started tearing up because of the music is so beautifully accompanying what I'm seeing. Let's not even start. I think we all agree that music and sounds in general play a huge part. When a scene is sad, we expect emotional music and emotional voice acting. When there's a boss fight, we expect intense music and epic sound effects. It's not just about it sounding good, it also has to work with everything else and provide a cohesive experience. Also, it's important to take note if a game knows when to be quiet. A game has to check all of these boxes in order to be considered, in my opinion. The game of the year is supposed to be outstanding in not just one aspect, but all of them, and in ways that are considered innovative. So, after taking these requirements into account, let's look at an example of a game that would qualify as Game of the Year. As I'm making this video in 2021, I'll choose a game from this year to use as an example. My personal game of the year is Psychonauts 2. Not only because it was a long-awaited game for me, but because it fulfills the requirements. I will be diving into spoiler territory for Psychonauts 2 here while explaining how it fulfills the requirements, so if that's not something you want to hear right now, feel free to skip to this timestamp right here. The game was very entertaining. Some points were more frustrating than others, but ultimately I had such a great experience with the game. The puzzles were fun, the gameplay was smooth, and I just wanted to keep playing even when I was busy. The narrative was engaging for me, as someone who's played the previous games, but it was even engaging for my boyfriend, who had only seen a short snippet of the first game but watched the recap at the start of the second game in order to catch up. I was interested in learning more about the new characters while also seeing more of the old. I wanted to figure out the mystery behind the main story while also wanting to dive into people's brains and see what their individual stories were. I already used Psychonauts 2 as an example for coherent and creative graphics. It looks the same, albeit a bit more polished than previous games in the franchise, while also introducing so many new environments and wild effects, something kind of important to include in a game that mainly takes place in people's minds. Even the main menu is extremely cool. The voice acting is top-notch, and the sound design fits the game and its environment. My personal favorite is like a very small and simple thing, but it's overhearing coworkers' conversations. It's such a simple touch, yet it brings so much life and personality to the plays. There's no doubt that the music in Psychonauts fits with the situations or emotions you experience at any given moment. We go from themes whose vibes simply work, such as the Flea Circus's theme song being both intense and goofy, as circuses tend to be, to something a bit more on the nose, such as Grulovia's national anthem twisted into a subjective version that fits a certain character's worldview. An extra bonus is that the music is catchy as hell, and that the theme song is super epic. People may look at the requirements I listed and find that other games check all the boxes, and that's why votes exist. The top 5 games that get the most nominations from a jury enter the final vote, the one that the public can vote on. Out of those, whoever gets the most votes out of the several games who may fit the criteria wins. But no matter who wins, there will be people who disagree. Everyone has different opinions. Some people will think Psychonauts 2 sucks, and that's just how it is. Not everyone will agree with the results because of our varying opinions, but that does not mean that whoever wins doesn't deserve it. All in all, some people's favorite color is blue and other people's favorite color is red. Anyway, this is how I personally determine which games should be nominated, in my opinion. I feel it's a decent way of looking at all aspects of a game to determine which one rose above the rest within a given year. I'd love to hear what games you'd consider to be Game of the Year based off of these requirements. From any given year, what was your Game of the Year 10 years ago? Do you think your favorite game of all time would have made Game of the Year based off of these requirements? Do you completely disagree with my way of nominating games? How would you personally do it? Feel free to tell me all your opinions. Just don't be mean. I can't take it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day.